Hello and welcome. Today we're going to dive deep into a passage from the Quran that gets a lot of attention, and for very good reason. It's from the fifth chapter, Surah Al-Mā'idah, and it really gets to the heart of some of the biggest questions a community can face. Loyalty, trust, and how you hold on to your faith when politics get, well, complicated. So let's explore this together.
So we start with verse 51, which right off the bat gives us a very stark command. I mean, on the surface, it can sound pretty absolute, and let's be honest, quite challenging to read in our modern, interconnected world. But like with any profound text, the real key is hidden in the details, and in this case, it all comes down to the meaning of one crucial word. And that leads us to the big question, the one that really unlocks this entire passage. What does the Quran actually mean here by allies? Is it talking about your neighbor, your coworker, a friend you have from a different background? Or is it pointing to something much, much more specific? Well, the Arabic term used here is awliyā, and this is where the context becomes absolutely everything. You see, classical commentators like the great Ibn Kathir, they didn't see this as some kind of ban on everyday friendship or just being kind to people. For them, it was a very specific warning against forming political and military alliances that could threaten the very survival of the early Muslim community back in 7th century Medina. The concern wasn't about friendship, it was about political allegiance. Okay, so if the warning is about these really high-stakes political loyalties, what was the real source of the danger? Well, the text suggests the biggest threat wasn't actually an external enemy. It was a weakness that was brewing right there, inside the community itself. The passage immediately points to a certain group of people, those in whose hearts is a disease. Now, this isn't a physical sickness, of course. It's a spiritual one. It's this potent mix of hypocrisy, of weak faith, and just pure opportunism. They're described as rushing into these forbidden alliances, not out of some principle, but simply out of fear. They're trying to hedge their bets because they are terrified of being on the losing side. And this just brilliantly illustrates the core problem. On the outside, these individuals are putting on a huge show of loyalty. They're swearing the strongest oaths, declaring their unwavering support for everyone to see. But on the inside, their motives are driven entirely by fear and self-interest. The text is just laser-focused on this dangerous gap between what they say and what they truly believe. So here's the bottom line. From the Quran's perspective, without that sincerity, all of those grand gestures and powerful promises, they're spiritually empty. They mean nothing. Their deeds, as the verse says, become worthless, and they ultimately end up as the losers because their actions just weren't built on a foundation of real, genuine faith. All right, so the passage has diagnosed this problem of hypocrisy and fear. But it doesn't just leave us there, which is what's so powerful about it. It then pivots beautifully to give us the solution. It provides this powerful redefinition of where true strength and real loyalty can actually be found. And here is that alternative. The text makes it crystal clear. Your only true, reliable ally, the only real wali, is God, His messenger, and the community of believers who are sincere. This isn't an alliance based on political calculations or fear. It's one that's grounded in a shared faith and in righteous actions, like establishing prayer and giving charity. Then, this idea is built upon even further by painting this really vivid picture of what this ideal community looks like. They are loved by God and they love Him back. They are humble with one another, but strong and powerful when faced with aggression. And, this is so critical, they strive for what's right without being afraid of what critics will say. It's a direct, powerful contrast to those fear-driven hypocrites we just talked about. And this whole section builds up to this incredible promise. It says that anyone who truly aligns themselves with God, with the prophet, and with the faithful community, they become part of Hizbullah, the party of God. And that this party, because it's grounded in sincere faith, is the one that will ultimately, in the end, be victorious. So from here, the passage kind of zooms out a little. It moves from defining loyalty within the community to advising the community on how to interact with those outside of it, especially those who might be openly hostile or disrespectful. The guidance here is actually very practical. It advises against forming those same kinds of close protective alliances, the awliyā, with people who openly ridicule the community's faith. The specific example it gives is mocking the call to prayer. Now, the point here isn't about avoiding all contact with people. It's about protecting the dignity and the integrity of the community's faith by setting some clear social boundaries. And what I find so fascinating here is that the text doesn't just issue commands. It actually engages in dialogue. It instructs the prophet to directly question the critics, to say to them, look, is the real reason you have a problem with us simply because we believe? It's a powerful rhetorical challenge that really forces the other side to look at the very basis of their own hostility. Now, the next few verses, they contain some very strong language and some pretty intense imagery, referencing past communities that faced divine consequences. And it's really important to see how classical commentators have always approached this. They don't see these as blanket condemnations of entire groups of people today. Instead, they view them as theological warnings, using these powerful stories from Scripture to teach a timeless moral lesson about what happens when guidance is rejected and wrongdoing persists. This all leads us to the conclusion of this passage, which so beautifully brings together both a stark warning and this wide-open invitation. It basically presents a clear choice to other communities of faith. It's all structured as a classic if-then statement. So first, you get the if. The text presents this hypothetical. It says, if only the people of the Scripture had embraced sincere faith and piety, it's like it's extending a hand, showing a path that is still open to them.
And right after the if, here comes the then. The consequence of making that choice would be complete forgiveness and the ultimate reward. It's just a powerful message of mercy, making it clear that the door to redemption is always open through sincere belief and righteous action.
So what this all builds to is a kind of universal principle that being faithful to divine revelation, whether it's the Torah, the Gospel, or the Quran, is presented as the path to prosperity both in this life and the next. And neglecting it, well, that leads to loss. But even here, the text adds this critical layer of nuance. It makes a point to state that among these other groups, there exists a moderate community, which is so important because it avoids the simplistic, unfair generalization about millions and millions of people. And that leaves us with a final thought to ponder. This passage, which is so deeply rooted in the specific challenges of a 7th century community, raises a question that is absolutely timeless. How does any community of faith, anywhere in the world, at any time in history, navigate that tension between its highest spiritual ideals and the messy, complicated, and often dangerous demands of political reality? That's a question we're thinking about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.